3 years since the manga first finished its publication, GANTZ finally has a new anime. Of course, it's been much longer since anyone actually cared about GANTZ, but that's okay. So before I talk about GANTZ O, I'm going to talk about GANTZ and how much it sucks. For me, GANTZ has always been an enjoyably trashy experience. I marathoned through the anime twice with a friend of mine, and was following the manga religiously for a while, but I never pretended it was anything more than a splatterfest. The premise is very simple. There's a bunch of people in skin-tight black suits participating in an alien death game. Of course, this raises many questions, like where did the GANTZ ball come from? Why is there a person inside of the GANTZ ball? Why are they playing for points? Who's forcing these people to be in a death sport? Why are these aliens on Earth? Why is the GANTZ team killing them? And all of these questions get answered with horribly disappointing answers. And here's where GANTZ falters. The series grows from trashy horror schlock to a middle portion which is legitimately good, and then finally drags on into its last portion which gets more boring. At its very worst, GANTZ is trying to be something it's not, philosophical. Specifically in the anime exclusive ending, which just repeats,
"No labyrinth is inescapable."
What?
ad nauseum, trying to sound deep, but there's no substance because it's GANTZ and it's more focused on tits and blood. Then there's the manga, which goes off the deep end with this terrible expositional rant given to us by this Hitler head god. It's really just the mangaka, Hiroya Oku, trying to sound smart and sophisticated. But it's not smart and sophisticated because it's GANTZ and it's more concerned with ass and gore. Now, here comes GANTZ O, which I can say unironically is the best thing to come out of GANTZ. The odds were already in its favor. It was produced by Digital Frontier. While they're not a big name in the industry, they have worked on Metal Gear Rising, the live-action Death Note movies, and just the live-action GANTZ movies as well. So if anyone had a resume prepared for action schlock gorefest, it was Digital Frontier. Plus, it's adapting the Osaka arc, widely considered to be one of the high points in GANTZ, not to mention it's from that middle portion where the manga is actually good. Now, right off the bat, the CGI is gorgeous. The backgrounds are all highly detailed and the monsters look great. The character models are probably the weakest part, but they're on par with the best CGI out there. Compare this with GANTZ's first anime outing, which just looks terrible. Absolutely terrible. Even for its time, the animation was stiff with a fill bucket color palette. If GANTZ is a 3-course meal, GANTZ the anime was a bag of french fries you found in the trash. Everything is streamlined in GANTZ O. Going back to what I said earlier, the manga was great at setting up questions and terrible at answering them. O circumvents this by throwing us right in the middle of things. There's no reason to ask questions about the ball's origins, because there's no answers for us. The movie doesn't even focus or bring up these questions, so there's no disappointment when they're not answered. If anything, it shows that GANTZ might have been better if it just never answered anything at all. This is an action movie first and foremost, and it wants to remind you that it's an action movie all the time. In fact, it's practically one big action scene from beginning to end. There are a few moments where things slow down so the audience can get their bearings. These scenes would provide the barest minimum of exposition and character development, so if you're here for well-developed characters in an interesting and well-thought-out setting, you're in the wrong place. The characters are distinct enough so we know who's dying, and when they're dying. This is fine though, because the movie is just focusing on the manga's strengths while cutting down its weak points, which makes it the best thing to come out of GANTZ as a whole, unless you count that figure of K that you might have considered buying, if it wasn't going to attract strange looks from your friends and family. And then you bought it anyways. Towards the end, GANTZ O does fall into some of the same traps that the original manga did. The final boss, as it were, of the movie kind of goes on this whole god rant speech. But unlike the manga, where this was a major part of the story, all of this deep shit in GANTZ O is really just like 1 or 2 lines and then it's gone and you're right back into it. I also want to bring up the creature variety. Now, this really shouldn't be that much of a surprise to anyone that read the manga, but the Osaka arc has a large collection of aliens, a lot of them kind of reminiscent of ancient yokai, some of them just fucking freaky as hell, some of them are just a pile of tits that I don't know if I can show on YouTube. There's a very big difference between these aliens in the Osaka arc and the big bad aliens that they had at the end of the manga. Because what GANTZ gives us is this wide variety of monsters. What the manga ended with was just the same monster repeated 1,000 times. And this is where GANTZ wisely chose the section of the manga to adapt, because it got to showcase all of these bizarre looking aliens. The action scenes in GANTZ are fast paced, with everyone and everything moving around, and sometimes jiggling too. It really wants to remind you of how much of an animation budget it has. Not to mention, the Osaka arc gives us a nice selection of weapons and vehicles, adding a lot of variety. In the anime, with the portion that they covered, and with the budgetary restrictions, a lot of the fights and action scenes would amount to two people standing in front of a monster and just shooting their gun as many times as possible. Now you got people like jumping off shit, punching things right in the face, fucking giant armor man with swords on his fucking elbows and shit. On top of all of that, you have a giant robot fight ripped straight out of Pacific Rim. The last thing I want to bring up is this movie's ability to stand alone, or lack thereof. There will be a lot flying over your head if you haven't read the manga, and while I usually advocate for reading the source material before the adaptation, GANTZ sets itself up as an introduction for new viewers. If you can't stand shallow characters and unanswered questions, you're better off reading the manga and coming back to the movie. Of course, the manga is full of shallow characters and unanswered questions, but if you're here for blood and tits, you won't be disappointed either way. So that's about it. Check out GANTZ. GANTZ is currently on Netflix, so you can check it out there if you're in the mood for some schlocky Japanese shit. And if you like similar things, older anime, weird Japanese movies, you can check out my channel and all of its reviews and shit. Should have more shit coming soon, so yeah, I don't have a sign off.
I'm lonely as floating ice. Yeah.